EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody. A Thursday edition of Birds 365. Moving right along this week. A good Thursday morning to you, Johnny Mac. A good Thursday morning to all of our listeners, all of our watchers, all of our streamers, including all the people who listen on the podcast after the show. So we thank you guys. Make sure you guys leave a like on the show this morning. Make sure you guys leave a review if you're listening on the podcast. Johnny Mac, how you doing this Thursday morning?
Doing well. Yeah. Good off-season week. First one. So, viewers are there. It's exciting. People like this team. I found that out.
Yeah, people really do like this team, as do I, and as do all of our listeners in the chat. I want to welcome everybody in. C24 already spamming us with dumb stuff. Jason, Mike, John, what's up, everybody? We appreciate you guys being here this morning. Johnny Mac, I want to start with a topic I got asked yesterday. It's a good topic. How long do you think it will take this football team to get in rhythm with new coordinators? Do you expect a delay? I know when we did our schedule, I remember talking about, they might sputter a little bit out of the gate because of the new coordinators. How long do you think it will take them to get in rhythm this year with new coordinators?
Yeah, I think it's a much bigger deal on the offensive side than the defensive side, not only because of the status of the coordinator, but they've been playing that scheme now. This will be the fourth year. So they were trying to replicate Vic's scheme for the past 3 seasons, and now they have Vic. So I don't think there's as much drastic change. So to me, it defaults back to, well, you probably have the better coordinator than what you had before, even with Jonathan Gannon, because it's his system, big system. So that to me is the normal sort of ramp up on any NFL season. You got to integrate the rookies, the new players, and all that kind of stuff. And that's just normal. That goes on in every NFL city. Offensively, you've already seen it. I mean, we had BLG on yesterday. Brandon's there like me. We've been there every year for Nick Sirianni, and dating back well prior to that, we've seen a lot of OTAs, a lot of off-season stuff, a lot of mini camp work. If you go back to the pre-COVID as well, it ain't like what it typically was in this off-season, especially with this kind of talent. It was really a struggle for them. And that's because as Jalen Hurts got out there, it's 95% new. It's not scientific, obviously, but what he's trying to get apart, trying to get out, is that it's going to take a while. There's going to be some growing pains when you learn a completely new offense, even with the talent they have. So you already saw it in the spring. That'll continue in the training camp, and it'll probably continue all the way into early in the season. But ultimately, I think they have so much talent, they're going to be fine. But I think for people assuming that it's going to be, pedal to the metal immediately, probably not.
Yeah, I think the offense has a chance to get going. Now, the one thing I think that's good about this year, especially with new coordinators, is they are experienced, right? You're not like last year we had Brian Johnson and Sean Desai, 2 guys that were pretty, wet behind the ears in terms of experience and coordinating. Even with Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, they were 2 guys also that had to acclimate. Now this year you have Vic Fangio, obviously nobody's questioning the experience there, and then Kellen Moore, who's been doing this quite a bit. So I think, how much do you think that experience factor bridges the gap to, let's just call it, being able to compete for a Super Bowl? I mean, last time we went, it was year 2. Everybody talks about being in continuity, and sometimes it takes 2 years with new coordinators. I think it could be bridged quicker with the experience of these guys, namely Vic Fangio on defense, but also Kellen Moore. I think he's going to get this thing going pretty quick. How much do you think the experience bridges that gap?
Somewhat. I think it bridges it from the perspective of these guys don't have to learn on the job when it comes to things that involve them. is how I would describe it. In other words, in the case of Vic and even Kellen, they've been through a lot. So the curveballs to them personally are probably going to have less of a growing pain aspect to it, as first time coordinators are very young coordinators because they've seen it all, they've done it all, they've been through it all, so they're used to that. But the part where it doesn't help is that they're new to this team, this city, these players, so they have to still learn their players and maximize their players that they have currently as much as possible, which to me is the definition of coaching. So that part of it doesn't change, whether you're a rookie coordinator or a 40 experienced assistant coach like Big Fangio. That part of it doesn't change, but they're better equipped for handling it from a personal level. They've been through it, they understand it. So it should be a little bit better, but you're always going to have that ramp up period of just learning the players and the talent that you do have and trying to utilize that as best as possible. A lot of people have brought up Devin White because he had a good spring and he's a blitzing linebacker. And Devin spoke to us last week, and he said, he's just trying to prove what he can do to Big Fangio, and the assumption is that if he can do it, Big's going to utilize it, and that's the kind of stuff you're talking about. So, but that doesn't change with, as I said, a rookie or a longtime coach.
Yeah, so we'll see how it all plays out with the coordinators. I think they're in a good spot with the offense, namely because of the talent. I mean, when you have that much talent, you have a $175 million offense. You have the guys they do, the offensive line they do. I'm confident that Kellen Moore will be able to get it going. But I think there's a lot of, everybody's worried about the defense, but I think the expectation lies in the offense and in getting Jalen Hurts going, and him returning to that 2022 form. I want to ask about, namely, specifically the offense. Do you think that the RPO is going to be a big part of this offense this year?
Well, it better be. If it isn't, then then you got to start looking at the offensive coordinator. That's part of the strength of Jalen Hurts.
How much did our use of the RPO though go down last year compared to 22?
That's sort of a loaded question from the perspective of, Jalen was clearly dealing with an injury. How long that over that span was, did they try to limit it a little bit, from the standpoint of, which I don't agree with, extended shelf life, trying to turn Jalen Hurts into Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, who's going to be around for 20 years. That's probably not going to happen. So, I would hope the Eagles understand that. And it's a different style of quarterback. And I'm all about maximizing what you have for whatever shelf life you have it for. That's, I think, the most common sense approach. So from that standpoint, they were a little bit less, but it wasn't drastically less. And again, even from that standpoint, when people do these stats, advanced stats, or whomever, whether it's PFF or somebody else, they don't know the mentality. Chip used to talk about this, who brought it, you might think it's an RPO, but it might be his own read. There might not be an option in it built in, called in on a particular play. But from the mechanics of what people think an RPO is, from just the eye standpoint, it better be a part of the process. I will say that. If it doesn't, start criticizing Kellen Moore right off the bat, because that's just dumb.
Yeah,
and it's a different way for play action. So a lot of people say, well, he's play action. Well, yeah, he is typically. And he said, Justin Herbert, that's a play action quarterback. The way people think of traditional play action. But that's what the RPO is. A different way when you put the passing option in there. It's essentially play action. It's just a different style of play action. So it's all about both are about putting defenders in conflict and, making them take that false step or forcing them to take a false step and then throwing it behind the linebackers and things like that. Um, so they can both accomplish the same goal. But when you have a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, you better be using those RPO mechanics. I will say that.
Do you think they have fear about his ability to continue to do it from an injury standpoint? Remember, 22, he didn't play every game. Now that was when it seemed like, at least from the outside, that he was the most RPO heavy. He was also the most successful. I mean, he had a phenomenal year in 22. Obviously, we went to the Super Bowl. He was an MVP runner-up. I'm concerned that the business side of the NFL will get in the way of that, even if we don't agree with it. We've said consistently, and I think most people agree with it, I'd rather get 8 years of Jalen Hurts at his peak or 10 years than 15 years of Jalen Hurts being somebody he's not. But it's easy for me to say when you dish out $255 million. I just wonder if there's some of the business of the NFL that might get in the way of how they call plays with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I hope not. I mean, can I say 100% it won't? No, because that business aspect is real. I think it's dumb. If you think about that 255 million and you think about, and I get the number and it's astronomical and I get people saying it, and you talk about a Tom Brady like shelf life. I mean, 255 million ain't getting you to 20 years if Jalen Hurts did turn into Tom Brady. In other words, you're going to have a bunch of more packed onto it. So look, I'm pretty consistent. You can't legislate injuries, so you're wasting time worrying about it. And I don't think the football side worries about it for that perspective. I mean, all they talk about is control what you can control. But you're right, the business side comes into it. And I hope that's not the case. And Nick Sirianni has said pretty consistently, I don't want to take away his superpower. He's very unique. We have to embrace that and all that kind of stuff. So I think he certainly understands it. But yeah, the business side is real. And, we've seen it in the past. But the Eagles are typically a little bit smarter than most teams. And I think they understand what they have in the quarterback. And then there's the evolution, Jalen personally. Jalen doesn't want to get hurt. And sometimes when you looked at last year, when he pulled up and he went down and people didn't like, maybe that's Jalen Hurts saying, hey, I got to live to play another down here. So that factors into it as well.
Yeah, well, that I think is a good thing. I mean, Jalen's going to know best what situation that is good for him and bad for him based on all the hits he's probably taken in his long football career. So I have no problem with him doing that. I just don't want them to change the complete style of play, and I think you are at risk of doing that. How different do you think this Kellen Moore offense will be, and what do you think he'll add to it? If let's just say they're going off the 23 offense of what they had, they were 8th ranked. Kellen Moore comes in. I know we talk a lot about motion. What do you think Kellen Moore adds to this offense?
Yeah, well, I think from just the fan perspective, it'll be the motion and the bunch formations. It's going to be very similar from the standpoint of traffic and who's getting the football. He's an 11 personnel guy. Nick's an 11 personnel guy. Most offensive coaches are 11 personnel guys. They want to spread the field as much as possible. They want to take advantage of matchups, and the Eagles have the playmakers in theory to take advantage and set up things. So I think, the eyewash is going to be different, as Jim Schwartz would call it. But the framework is not going to be that different. And sometimes that's all you need when you have the best players. Like I get a kick out of the too predictable thing. And I always bring up the Cowboys and Jimmy Johnson's Cowboys. Yeah, all right. Everybody knew what they were doing. Everybody. Everybody. They couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, but at least they had a play that worked and players that worked. I mean, you could say the predictability came with the bubble screens, and you know what I mean. Plays that weren't.
Well,
If they were
execute
running
it,
a
and it's
slant to
not
AJ
predictable.
Brown,
Execute it, and it's not predictable. That's kind of my point. And Kellen knows that, and he said it. And you know, when he's talking about clean operation, and so to me, this is about dressing it up differently, change for the change's sake, and it's going to be about the talent and how they execute, and specifically the quarterback. I mean, like we know AJ Brown is AJ Brown. We know Devontae Smith is Devontae Smith. We know Dallas Goedert's Dallas Goedert. To a certain degree, you know about the offensive line, even without Jason Kelsey. So there's two players where there's a little bit of wiggle room, and that's Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. And do they hit the top part of that wiggle room,
right?
or do they hit the bottom part of that wiggle room? And I think that will be the difference with the Eagles offense.
Let's go to a comment from Mike Fittery. I want to welcome everybody in today. We have a full hour and 20 to play. We'll have Martin Frank in hour number 2, who asked the question that everybody's been talking about, the Jalen Hurts. So we'll talk to Martin Frank in hour number 2. But in hour number 1, Johnny Mac and I have a good hour and 20 minutes to talk. So if you guys have any good comments, not dumb stuff, if you guys have any good comments, good questions for us, I will definitely field some of your comments and some of your questions. Mike says, I think he'll have tight ends and AJ lining up in different spots. I have seen a lot of commentary on that, Johnny Mac. You think that's something Kellen Moore will do?
Well, he's always played all three. He's played X, he's played Z, he's played flex. And so is Devontae.
Yeah.
So, you know, how much does it change? A lot of that is going to change. Can they find a competent third receiver? Can they find a competent slot receiver? Is that Paris Campbell, or is it somebody else? If they do, not as much as you're speculating. If they don't, probably a little bit more, because they'll want to take advantage of some matchups in the slot in theory. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing from that perspective. Like I don't want AJ playing in the slot a ton. I think that's a waste of one of the best 5 receivers in football. So
What if you can get? I see. I agree here because it's like he's a mismatch on any cornerback in the league. Doesn't matter who they are. What if you can get him lined up against a safety?
well, yeah, if you can, that's the whole thing about matchups. But
Yeah.
most teams are pretty.
Yeah,
Most teams are not going to. Most teams are not going to lose track of AJ Brown. So and say, oh, hey, we got fooled. The safeties on AJ Brown. I'm not saying it's never going to happen because teams make mistakes all the time. But if that happens, that is a bad mistake by the defense. Where no matter where he lines up, including the backfield. If you want to put him in the backfield, a lot of people, Eagles have done it occasionally with Devontae Smith, where you try to hide him in the backfield and try to create a matchup, a mismatch that way. You know, that's a blown identification from the defense if it happens, and it's possible it happens. And remember, you're talking about situations, and that wins games. So if it's a big spot and you can manipulate them from the slot to get a good matchup, and it wins you a game by converting a first down, or that, it's huge. But I think when people say that, and I might be wrong, and the commenter can clarify, I think he's talking about volume, and I don't think it's about volume. From a volume perspective, you don't want AJ Brown in the slot a ton. You want to find a slot receiver. That's the goal of the Eagles. Can you take advantage of it in a big situation and try to manipulate it that way? Sure. But I think those are two different conversations.
Yeah, I think this is what a lot of people point to. He said that's how Lamb racked up yards. A lot of people do see that in Dallas, and Lamb's in that slot a lot.
Yeah, well, he's a slot. I mean, they use him as a slot.
Yeah, well, they're not going to pay him
different.
like a slot receiver. That's for
No,
sure.
no. But I mean, again, AJ's proven himself as an outside receiver. There's no difficulty getting the football outside. And you know, they're different types of receivers. AJ's a giant, you know, traditional. You know, if you've seen him, if you've seen his pictures on Instagram, he ain't CD Lamb. He is a big X receiver that can do a lot of different things. You are doing him a disservice if you play him in the slot, and that's what he said. So he's talking about volume because CD does it a
Yeah,
lot.
it's volume for sure.
Justin Jefferson does it a lot. Those guys are different types of receivers, and you know they can do both. They're both great, and AJ can do it, and he's great. But they're not the same types of players. If you want that, it would be more Devontae than AJ.
Yeah, because Devontae fits the mold, or at least looks more the part physically, closer to CeeDee Lamb, closer to Justin Jefferson. Like
the best case is to find a slot receiver. That's the best case.
You think they're going to do it? You think they're going to go outside the locker room and bring somebody in?
Yeah. They have to get better.
I don't really think they're gonna, to be honest.
You know, it's funny. Everybody's putting out their post mini camp 53, and everybody's got 6 receivers. And you know, I'd probably put 6 receivers on there myself at this stage. But I'm like, that's one of the weakest positions they got after AJ and DeMonte. What are you carrying so many receivers? And most people have Paris and Britton Covey, and Britton's going to make the team as obviously the punt returner, and then the 2 rookies, Johnny Wilson, Anaya Smith. And I'm like, you know, Anaya Smith hasn't caught the football at all. You can't get him on the practice squad. Johnny Wilson, you can't get him on the practice squad. And if they do get picked up on waivers, all right. Didn't work out. Now, I agree with all those people that the Eagles are going to keep him on the 53 because that's just the modern GM. They hate cutting draft picks. But those guys aren't ready to play.
I just wonder. They came in with Zach Pascal 2 years ago, Olamide Zaccheaus last year, and Quez Watkins.
And those are not meaningful. That's what Paris
That's what I mean. Like they went into the season with those guys. The last 2 years they had AJ and Devontae. I think they might just feel okay with Paris Campbell. You don't have to like it, but I think the Eagles might not be as worried about that.
Yeah, I'm hoping John Ross can shake the rust.
Do you think John Ross would be the slot guy, or would he be the backup on the outside?
Well, you could do both.
You can do both, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's a long shot. I'm not trying to, but you can see his talent in as Howie would say, the twitch in his body. It's just different. And obviously it didn't work out in Cincinnati, but you could see just the framework of why he was a top 10 pick. He's still young, so he's still got that athleticism. And it's a very long shot. But, I mean, he signed late, and he was getting first-team reps by the end of minicamp. So that tells you how quickly it was progressing. I wouldn't bet on it, but you know, I think Paris Campbell is what you just said, you know, more of a Olamide Zaccheaus type than a Zach Pascal type. But overall, just, you know, he's an NFL player, but it's not going to be splashy. But I always thought there's only one football. I don't know if they have a split. You know, it's not like, you know, people brought up Hunter Renfrow, and you know, he's not the same player when he had 100 receptions, but even if he was, he wouldn't be on the open market, number one. But from the standpoint of, you know, would you really want him throwing the football to a great slot receiver 100 times when you have all their
No
other
way.
playmakers.
Yeah.
So
It's
again,
a
be careful
30
what
to
you wish
40
for.
catch type of guy, probably.
Yeah. So I don't know,
Mike
but
brings up, but what Mike brings up, Britton Covey in the chat. I think he'd be great in the slot. They don't
yeah,
like him
I
there.
wish they'd give Britton a chance, but they're not going to. It's evident. He's got tremendous yeah, he's got when you think of the slot receivers that people tend to think of, the what Wes Welkers, the Julian
Yeah, Julian
Edelmans,
Edelman.
those types. He's got that type of short area quickness to win on option routes, but he's so small. I just don't think the Eagles see him as an offensive player. And I think they should give him a chance. And I think if they gave him a chance, he'd win the job, at least for the guys here. But I don't talk about him that much because I don't think they see him that way.
We spoke a little bit about AJ Brown. I wanted to bring up this article I saw from Tim McManus over on ESPN. Anybody that's listening to the show right now, I recommend going reading in the article when the show is over. It's if you're an Eagle fan and you're an AJ Brown guy, it's interesting to get a look. Tim talked to AJ's trainer in Florida. The guy, I think he's the head athletic trainer at FAU. I can't think of his name right now. Joey Garasio. And just talked about how AJ's off-season workout regimen right now and how locked in he is from a physical perspective and nutritionally. He's down to 7% body fat. Worked on that knee where he had the knee problem going into the playoff game last year. So really good article. I have high expectations for AJ Brown this year. He seems to be really doing all the right things off the field. Let's go to James Carver. First super chat of the day. Thank you, James Carver, 1999. We appreciate it, brother. J-Mac, are official people like you informed by teams on things like RPOs, checks actually existing, et cetera, because an immediate outside DB read from RPO will become pass, and people don't count RPO unless a later DB reads because it's obvious. Any response to James Carver there, John?
No, we don't, and nobody has that. And coaches hold on to that, and that's why I brought up Chip. Would often bring up, what you think is an RPO isn't necessarily an RPO. And it was in Chip's case, he was kind of ludicrous, especially during the Sam Bradford, Nick Foles era, when everybody knew they weren't going to hold it and run the football. But anyway, he used to talk about it all the time. So no, there is no official scoring system because no coaches are not going to come out and say this, that, this, and go through every play and say it's just not possible. So the people that do it, like PFF, they do the best job possible, but it's never going to be 100% accurate. And yeah, the Eagles even say there's an extra pass option because of Jalen Hurts' ability. So they say, run pass option. Because of Jalen's ability to extend the play. So all of this factors into it. But the biggest part to me, and the thing that's most important, is the conflict it creates in the defenders. And are you able to take advantage of that? That's the goal of the RPO. And you got to read it right from the quarterback's perspective. And you got to execute it, which again is that word that it's not an excuse, but that's the reality of every NFL play. It's easy to say it, but then you got to go out and execute it. And that's the bigger part of it.
He's a good follow-up from James. I mean, and I trust there were checks in offense, even though people didn't always see them. I think that's definite, James. I mean,
oh yeah. I mean, well, you look at the Seattle play. We had no idea.
Yeah.
How would we possibly know? How would anyone possibly know? Forget about educated media members or educated fans. We have no idea that they're checking from what they're supposed to run, and still to this day, we don't know what they were supposed to run. But that's where you put the trust in your quarterback, and he's got to make the right decision on the field. That's why a lot of the criticism that goes to the coaching staff is ill warranted from another perspective. Now, again, it's not an excuse, it's an explanation. because coaches often make wrong decisions. That's not what I'm trying to say. But the assumption of, and we heard this a million times, the assumption of, well, the Eagles have no answers for the blitz. The coaches are not giving Jalen Hurts answers for the blitz, aren't they? They might, and he might not be utilizing them correctly. He might not be on the same page with AJ or Devontae as far as sight adjustments, as far as picking up what the defense is going to do, as far as making sure it's called correctly, and you default to the bubble screen. Is that the coach's fault or the quarterback's fault? I wish I could tell you. I'll tell you this. I hope it's the quarterback's fault, because then it really is bad. And I don't think it is that bad. I think there were answers, hot routes, or again, you can go to a high school game and you're going to see hot routes in an offense. So to assume NFL coaches can't do that is kind of ludicrous, but I say it all the time. Fans generally don't want to blame star players for things that go wrong.
We got some good topics for segment number 2, but I want to hit a couple more chats. We got some good questions from the guys in the chat right now, Johnny Mac. They like getting the responses from you. So let's keep going on them. Matt Gene Giles joins Zander. John, how do you guys feel about Hurts being under center more doing play action? I guess we don't know if that's really going to be how it works. We'll see when the offense comes. But Johnny Mac, if he did do that, what would you think of it?
I wouldn't love it.
That's
not what he is. And again, the RPO is the same thing as play, a traditional. We talked about that in the opening. Traditional play action, which is Justin Herbert, back to the defense, good bait. Aaron Rodgers, the best ball faker of all time, putting it in the stomach, pulling it out. Maybe you got the linebacker stepping up. Maybe you got the DBs with the false step, and bang, you got a big play down the field. That's what he's talking about. I don't think that's the strength of Jalen Hurts. I don't want to change him. Can you do it a little bit more? Sure. But again, if you're talking about volume, I don't think it'd be a good thing. Their RPO, their play action is the RPO game. Again, same thing. Create conflict with the defender. And that's what they do best. And that's when the change was first met with this construed, we're going to mesh the offenses together.
Yeah.
I didn't like that, but that's one thing the Eagles did well. And my presumption is if Kellen Moore's a good offensive coordinator, as most people think he is, he's going to realize that's what Jalen does best, and he's going to put that in the offense. So it takes care of itself. But yeah, if you want to turn him into Kirk Cousins or, a Kyle Shanahan quarterback, good luck with that. I don't think that's the best utilization of Jalen Hurts. Now, can he improve a little bit on these individual things? Sure. But
yeah, to turn the offense into that would be counterproductive, I think.
Yeah, that's what I think.
I just have a fear, though, that there's this train of thought where you're so locked in on what the traditional steps of a quarterback should be and the traditional progression of a quarterback when he gets to the NFL. Are they going to continue to force feed that and expect Jalen to become that one day? I don't know. I just wonder where it's like every quarterback you have, okay, they take time to learn, they take time to read the defenses, and then these things are the next part of the progression. Well, it's not really with a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, but I wonder if they do try and force that into his game, namely like a play action like that.
Yeah, I hope not. And again, there's a difference between, does he need to improve? Yes. But again, if you're talking about volume, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with changing him as a quarterback. I don't think that's the proper way to go. Um, Now, do you want them to improve on certain things? And that's one of them. You want to be able to get him a little bit more comfortable under center. Basically, the only time he's under center has been, tush push times. So yeah, but does he need to be under center a ton? I think that's counterproductive. Um, yeah, I don't get that mentality. So a little bit, yes. It's like wise man avoids all extremes. Should you be last in the NFL in utilizing pre-snap motion?
Right.
No. Should you be first in the NFL? No. Um, but you probably don't want to be bottom five as anything, which comes directly from the head coach. Big Fangio and the blitz, that's going to be a big talk because it's always a big talk. And, Seth's going to talk about it. Everybody's going to talk about it. They don't blitz. They don't blitz because it's going to be 21, 22%. That's going to be his blitz percentage. He's been around a while. You can check
At least
this
we have a
out.
coordinator now that will own that. I love that about Vic. Like, I don't care what you're
Yeah.
going to say. I'm going to do what I want to do.
His whole philosophy, I get frustrated because I was explaining this to a fellow media member who said, well, Devin White can blitz because he's got a bunch of sacks.
Yeah.
And again, you're looking at a piece of paper with a number on it. Big man, look at the other piece of paper, which is a far larger sample size of Big Fangio's blitz percentages. He's going to blitz in the low 20%. That's not to say he can't rush. Now, what Vic does well, if Devin White can rush the passer, and he can, that's one of the strengths of him as a linebacker. He'll utilize it at certain specific times if he even wins the starting job, which we got to get there first. But the assumption is he's going to win a starting job. And, typically if he rushes him, he's going to drop somebody else. So a blitz is 5. A blitz is +1. So a blitz isn't Devin White coming if Josh Sweat drops. That's not a blitz. So that's number one. But the second part of that aspect is his whole defensive philosophy is about the +1 and the +1 being in coverage as much as humanly possible. So yeah, he's not going to blitz a lot. Get used to that. And he just doesn't believe in it. And you're more likely to see 8-man coverages, put +2 in coverage. Especially if these young defensive backs start to really hit the ground running. But anyway, that was a tangent.
Well, let's go defense now. We took a bunch of questions on offense. Messiah Armstrong's in here. Good morning, guys. Do you see this defense being well improved or taking a lot of bumps before they mature? Tough to say. I mean, I think they're going to be what? Can I answer both? I think they're going to be improved.
It is. That's the right answer. Yes, they're going to be improved, and they're going to have a bunch of hiccups. Yeah. I mean, all young players go through that. And they're going to be very young in the secondary. But yeah, I mean, I said the day Vic got here, it's going to be competent.
I do think they lost. I think they lost more talent on defense than they gained. Now, I think Vic Fangio covers that gap and then some. But you did lose Fletcher Cox and Hassan Reddick. Now, I think they're positioned okay. They obviously went and signed Bryce Huff to replace that Hassan Reddick role. They have Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, who are going to step up, take bigger roles this year with no Fletcher Cox. But I see where there could be pause about, I mean, you added Gardner Johnson and stuff like that. So I get it. But I think there's reason for pause, though, when you think about the losses on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah. I mean, Fletcher's a big deal. It's, Chris Long, was on some kind of podcast talking about, his selflessness as a player and the fact that he enabled people to do other things. And I think that's underrated. Jim Swartz would always talk about being disciplined, and sometimes it's hard to get stars to be disciplined on the defensive side of the ball. That was one of the criticism of the defensive front late last season. So I do think he's going to be a bigger loss than maybe people realize, because he wasn't the player he once was towards the end of his career. And obviously, Hassan, I mean, say what you want about Hassan. I get why the Eagles did what they did, but he's productive. I mean, there aren't too many other edge rushers in this league that can match his production. So you can't just assume Bryce Huff is going to replace that production. But I will say, from a smaller sample size, and it's more than 1 year too, he's been a consistent pressure producer. So I get why the Eagles are evaluating him of taking that next step. And if he does, I think everything's going to be fine. But it's a big if. It's definitely a big if.
One more question, and then we'll go to a break. Our man Cody, let me find it. Cody K, who's always in here giving us the support. So we appreciate you, Cody K. Johnny Mac, this has come up a lot. Do you think Justin Simmons comes to Philly to help with safety depth? If not Justin Simmons, insert name. I hear a lot of people in the chat on this show, on the afternoon show, talking about they want a more aggressive safety, a physical safety, a guy that can tackle. Fans not sold on Reed Blankenship like you are, Johnny Mac.
No. I know everybody wants. I mean, Justin's one of those guys who I assume doesn't want to deal with off-season
Stuff,
work,
right?
Because it's just weird that he's still out there. And that I get the history with Vic Fangio, but yeah, I don't think it's coming. I think the Eagles. I think if they didn't have CJ, if they didn't get CJ back, I think, maybe somebody like Justin would be here. But they made their decision about that particular safety spot, and it's going to be CJ, and Reed's going to be the other one. And I keep saying Sidney's going to be back. Don't forget about Sidney Brown. He's going to be back, if not for week 1, very, very early in the season. And the Eagles still like him a lot. And I think they should. You saw some of his athleticism. So I've said it pretty consistently. I don't think safety is as big as a need as most people do. I think there's far bigger needs: linebacker, backup wide receiver, even backup defensive tackle. Because you also have the versatile nature of Avonte Maddox. You got the versatile nature of Cooper DeJean, which could eventually encompass some safety work. And even somebody like Tyler Hall played safety as well as nickel with Las Vegas.
He's a name, John, that keeps getting brought up. Tyler Hall. He's like a sleeper on this team, I think.
He's another guy. All the DBs played so well in the spring. All the young, except Eli. Poor Eli didn't have a great spring. But Quinyon, Cooper, Kaylee Ringo, Isaiah Rodgers, Tyler Hall, they all were really good. And he's got some versatility as well. So I think that backup, I think that's the part that people miss. They have so many versatile players that can play in the pinch. Now, if CJ gets hurt early in training camp and Justin Simmons is still out there, then I'd say, yeah, go get him. But if you're bringing him in, you're bringing him in to be a starter. And I just think the Eagles believe in Reed Blankenship. And there's a little redundancy to CJ Gardner-Johnson and Justin Simmons. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. Reed Blanket, people bring it up in the chat. Reed can hit. He can tackle. He is physical. So I do agree with that. Maybe some people aren't giving him enough credit. Maybe I'm not giving him enough credit. I'm okay to do that. D Love with a super chat, Johnny Mac. He's going right to my line of thought. Would it be a good idea to trade Slay for maybe a wide receiver and play the young guys at cornerback? I think this is a fair question. Now, I don't think they're going to do it, but I certainly think it's a fair question and a fair thought. I mean, if you think about the depth at this cornerback room, even if, and I know we're still speculating, it's only spring, but if some of these young corners that we're talking about, Isaiah and Keeley, and then you have Quinion and Cooper, the depth at corner, and this might be the deepest the cornerback room has ever been in Philly. I mean, I know they had some good teams in the early 2000s on the corner, but depth like this is pretty crazy depth right now, considering James and Slay are still here. What are your thoughts? What are your final thoughts on this, Johnny Mac?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. They moved the trade deadline back to after week 9. So they moved it back a week from where it typically is. And I think if you're having a bad season, that's when it potentially could be a way to go. Obviously you don't want that if you're having a bad season. And I can't imagine this team being out of it by week 9. Even if they struggle early, they're not going to be out of anything. So, yeah, we talked about it a little bit yesterday. I think it's very, very unlikely. Right now, I mean, certainly no. Emphatic no right now. They consider themselves a Super Bowl contender. And for all the youth and just what you talked about, the depth, and it's all projected. Quinion Mitchell's a rookie. Cooper DeJean's a rookie. Isaiah Rodgers has been off for 500 days and looked good in shorts and pajamas, as Bobby King parlance.
Yeah.
Kaylee Ringo, I have tremendous optimism on, because AJ Brown has tremendous optimism, but that's what it is, optimism. So no, emphatic no right now. Come back to me at the trade deadline. But if it's in the question, in the mix at the trade deadline, that's a bad thing as well.
Well, I know you don't think it's going to happen. Can I get you to say whether you would, let's just say you're the GM of the football team, would you entertain this thought?
No, right now, no. They Slay's their best corner, and they're a Super Bowl contender. I don't know if I'm going that far. I don't know if, but I mean, I guess from a standpoint of who are the legit Super Bowl contenders in the NFC.
Well, hold that. We're going to do that next segment. We're going to do our top 7 rosters. So,
and I don't have the Eagles at the top of that list. So, but I do think the teams ahead of them are not so far ahead of them that if everything goes right, that they couldn't catch them. So, no, if I were the GM, I would not be even entertaining trading Slay at this point.
Well, the only thing I think that could be a fair thought would be potentially, it's potential, it's not guaranteed, that the young guys might play better than Slay at the start of the year. I mean, Slay is 33 years old. Like, eventually Father Time is going to hit him. I'm not saying it might not hit him this year, but eventually that's going to come, and that's going to do it. So we'll see. We'll see. But I do think from that perspective, that could, change it.
Well, I don't know how you're going to prove to Vic Fangio that, what are we talking about? Week 2, week 3? I don't think Vic is going to be given out to use a Jim Schwartz, again, go back to Jim, gold stars after 2 weeks. So even if Quinion Mitchell plays really well for 2 weeks and insert other name of other cornerback plays really well in practice, because he won't be on the field that much. I don't think he's going to be banging on Howie's door saying, I got to get this guy on the field through 2 weeks. So where does that happen? Again, the trade deadline's tonight. The second part of it, who's going to trade for him 2 weeks in? I mean, maybe at the trade deadline. So that's week 9, after week 9. And then the last part is you're not going to get anything for him because he's 33 and he makes so much money. So what's the point? you know.
I guess other than ripping
biggest,
the Band-Aid off to eat some of those startup costs with the young guys, there's really no point.
the only reason you would do it is because you so desperately wanted one of those young cornerbacks on the field. And I just don't see a path to that situation with this team. If we're a rebuilding team, I'd be the exact opposite. If we were saying this team's going to win 7 games, yeah, play the young guys, get the startup costs out of the way.
Right. All right, let's go to our first commercial break. That was pretty good. I honestly like getting some good questions like that. So I appreciate everybody in the chat. Thank you guys for being here. Really good questions, a lot of you guys, and there's more I missed, but we just don't have the time, so I can't get to them all. But I do appreciate you leaving all your thoughts in the comments. Mike and Dank, Ian, BMO, James Carver, Suplex City, so Wayne Miller. We appreciate all you guys. Make sure you drop a like on the show. I think we're already up almost 50 likes. So let's get to 100 likes during the live show. We're going to take a commercial break. We have Martin Frank in hour 2, but after the break, we're going to do our top 7 NFC rosters. So we'll see what Johnny Mac is thinking on who's going to be the top rosters in the NFC this year. I gave my top list the other day on the afternoon show with Dan Cilio, but I left the team off, and I had a blatant miss. So I'm going to correct that, and we'll do that all next on Birds 365, everybody. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Thursday's edition of Birds 365. Thank you all for being here this morning. And one little thing, Johnny Mac, before we go to our top NFC teams. You see, Jason Kelsey said he would love to be the purchaser of the minority stake in the Eagles. He said that on on his podcast. I think that would be
Yeah,
great. That
so
was
did
probably a little
Rob,
bit out of his price range, but
Rob
maybe he
Rob
could rally some
McElhaney
people.
wants it. Bradley Cooper wants it.
Yeah, everybody.
Yeah, I don't think any of them. Well, and I don't know what Jeffrey's looking to sell. I assume it's as I said, they're going up a 7.5 billion about
Valuation, right? So if he
valuation.
sells 10% of the team, like you said the
That's
other day, that's the
750
math of it. He
million.
doubles his initial investment.
Yeah, and that's 750 million. And as rich as those guys are, and I wish I was as rich as Jason Kelsey and Rob McElhaney. They don't have that kind of money, so that's unless it's a 1% stake. Hey, maybe they can get that together. So who knows?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize Jeffrey Lurie doesn't have that kind of cash on hand either.
No,
It's a asset worth $7.5 billion. That's why he's doing it. Probably liquidate, get some of his cash out, get his initial
pay for the
investment.
yacht, man. Spent 130 million on the
That
yacht.
confirmed that Jeffrey Lurie, did he really buy the yacht, or
He
is it all
did
hearsay?
buy a yacht. Yes. Is it confirmed? I haven't double sourced it, but yes, I've heard that he did buy the yachts.
So Jeffrey Lurie yacht shopping at the end of the year, and he actually makes the purchase. So pretty good stuff. Johnny Mac, let's get to our NFC teams. We've got about 20 minutes until Martin Frank is in. Let's start. I don't know if you have your 7 in front of you or if you're going off the top of your head. Let's start. I want to start going 7-1, but if you don't have a list, that might be tough for you to do.
Yeah, I can tell you the teams I have in front of them right off the bat.
Well, let's just go one. Let's go one then. One for me, I have the San Francisco 49ers, best roster in the NFC. Johnny Mac, who do you have at 1?
Detroit Lions. The Lions are loaded. They should have won last year. Let's be honest. They outplayed the 49ers. They made, it's tough to say they made mistakes by being so overly aggressive, but if they would have played it safe, and from my standpoint, it's like the reason they were there is because they were that aggressive. So it's hard to, tell them to change at the biggest moment, but it certainly bit them in the ass, and they're just loaded everywhere. So I think they're 1, and I think 49ers are 2.
Interesting.
Do
you think the Lions have a better roster now than the Niners?
Oh yeah, I think I had a better roster. They completely outplayed the 49ers completely. And again, they missed on support downs and got too overly aggressive and lost the game. The best team doesn't always win. Now you had Terry and Arnold to that defensive backfield. You saw how good Brian Branch was as a rookie. They got Enos Rackstraw. A lot of people early in the process said was going to be a first-round pick. I never believed that, but they added him as well. They got Melifanu, who from Syracuse, Carlton Davis, Kirby Joseph. The defensive front, they added DJ Reader, who's a good player from Cincinnati, to Alim McNeil. That's the guy Tom Donahue wanted to draft for the Eagles and got mad at Howie Roseman for overtaking it. He's turned into a very good player. Aiden Hutchinson is great. I don't love their linebackers, just like the Eagles. So they kind of go about it both ways. We saw they got a lot of criticism.
Did they take a linebacker, though, in round 1?
Well, you got Campbell.
Campbell, right.
Yeah, in the first round. A lot of people criticized them for their first-round picks. The Jamar Gibbs one worked perfectly.
Yeah, Jamar. I mean, he's a tremendous player, Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, not so much with Jack Campbell, but maybe he develops, and they still have they still have that possibility. The Eagles don't have a projection like Jack Campbell, even though he hasn't lived up to it yet. Offensively, they have a top 5 offensive line. They're in the conversation.
Yeah, their offensive. You could argue their offensive line is as good.
It could be the best in football. Sam Laporta, tremendous. Jared Goff, I think, is the most underrated quarterback in football. And now Jameson Williams is, finally ready to. He's completely healthy, coming off that. So you're adding him to Amon Ross St. Brown. I mean, they're loaded. They are loaded. The Detroit Lions. They are the best. San Francisco is number 2. And then I start thinking about the Eagles. Green Bay's another team you have to think about it.
Yeah.
Think about it. They have a ton of young talent. They're in the conversation. I mean, Dallas is still in the conversation. I know people.
Yeah, I don't think Dallas is this high though.
Well, they
I have the 49ers 1. I have the Eagles 2. And then you're kind of making me rethink that with that Detroit. I have Detroit 3. They're all it's kind of a pick 'em in all three
You're
of
being
them.
a homer if you got them over Detroit at this stage.
I mean, I think you could argue the same thing. I mean, I got Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, I got Lane Johnson, I got AJ Brown, I got Devontae Smith, I have Dallas Goedert, I have Saquon Barkley, I have Jalen Hurts, I have Darius Slay, I have
All
Jalen.
right, now go to the defense. Yeah,
I'm just saying you can
all
run
the
through a
talent.
list of names for the Eagles too.
The Eagles are very talent heavy on offense, no question about it. They lack depth. I think we've gone through that enough.
Yeah.
People understand. So depth comes into it. As I mentioned, I don't like the Lions linebacker situation all that much. That's the one glaring weakness to me. And I say the same thing here. But they project Alex Anzalone as a starter. He's just a guy, and Derek Barnes, who's another just a guy. But they have Jack Campbell. All right, what if Jack Campbell hits?
Yeah.
The
I see what
Eagles.
you're saying. Yeah, there's not even anybody with upside like that.
Yeah.
In Philly.
And defensive backfield, again, it's all projection with the Eagles. That Brian Brandt's already showed you. Bang. You hope one of your rookie defensive backs has an impact on the game as much as Brian Branch did last season for the Lions. And then, oh, by the way, the Eagles added Mitchell and DeJean. They added Arnold, who a lot of people thought was better, and Rakestraw. I mean, yeah, to me, the Lions are clearly the most talented team in the NFC, and the 49ers are second, and the Eagles are in the conversation for third. But I can make a argument for Green Bay, and we'll see week 1. People get to see in Sao Paulo, Brazil, how talented, how young and good the talent is there. And the Cowboys are still in the mix. But yeah, I have no problem with going Eagles third. And if you want to put Packers fourth, Cowboys fifth. And then there's a bunch of teams that are the Saints are talented, the Falcons are talented. If Kirk Cousins hits, I think the Bucs are obviously good. You saw that in the playoffs. The Rams are good. The Vikings are extremely talented if they can figure out the quarterback situation, but that's a big if.
I don't know I think Sam Darnold's going to start there. I really do.
There's no doubt in my mind Sam Darnold's going to start. I have some interest in that because he got to be under Kyle Shanahan for a year. So I want to see how that works out. If it doesn't work out, obviously, but if you look at that team, Jefferson, Addison, Hockenson, Aaron Jones, Christian Derrick, Ryan O'Neal. Yeah. They're loaded. They just don't have a proven quarterback. And defensively, everybody knows who watches this show. I'm a huge Brian Flores fan. So they don't have a ton of talent defensively, but he's like, I would say, Vic Fangio plus, in that he's going to get way more out of whatever they give him.
So Johnny Mac has Lions 1, 49ers 2. Didn't really go there, but I'll give Eagles 3 and then Green Bay 4. Who are you going to put in at 5?
Dallas is 5.
I don't have Dallas. I have Dallas that's down at 6 on mine.
Now Dallas has still got a bunch of talent.
They still got good players. Yeah, you're right.
I mean,
they
may have not extended Dak Prescott, but they still have him. They may have not extended CeeDee Lamb, but they still have him. So I think a lot of I don't like their running back situation. They brought back Zeke, but who cares?
I got
Ultimately,
LA. I have LA at 5. So mine is 49ers, then Eagles, then Detroit. Then I have 4. I have Green Bay. I think that's guaranteed. They're in that top class nearly. 5, I have LA, and then 6, I have Dallas.
yeah,
LA, I think, is
I
a
think
good
that's
team. They got
I
the best
think
coach in the NFC, I would say. I know they lost Aaron
now
Donald,
now
but
that I think about it, I just pulled up Dallas. I'm going to put Dallas ahead of Green Bay. Yeah,
really,
I think that's very Philadelphia centric. And again, Micah
that's all right. I'm
Parsons.
fine with you telling me that. I mean, it's just
Micah Parsons, another guy. Just because they didn't extend him, they still have him. So I think a lot of people have criticized Dallas in the offseason because they don't extend their good players, but they still have those players. And then you have Trayvon Diggs coming back from injury to add to Deron Bland. Yeah,
they're
they're
top heavy
very
too. Talk about top heavy team. That's a top heavy team.
they're very talented. Yeah, but I mean, we're talking about their starters, and that's the same thing we're talking about here. So if the Eagles are talented, you got to say they're talented, and they are. I mean, those two teams have been neck and neck for
So you're
years
going to
now.
put Dallas at 4.
Yeah, I'm going to put Dallas at 4, Green Bay at 5. Um, yeah, you know who else is talented, but I don't like their coach. There's a lot of things I don't like about New Orleans, but they have talent.
They have great talent. I have them right outside the 7 for me. I think I have them
They're
at 8.
especially defensively. They're a pain in the ass to deal with. And Dennis Allen's a defensive coach, and I don't necessarily love that setup. But they're a good team. Seattle, you can make an argument. I'm talking about lower
Yeah, I left
6,
Seattle out of
7.
my
The
7.
Rams, you could make that argument. I think the Rams are a little bit overrated because of Sean McVay and Les Snead and their reputations.
Yeah, I still am high on the quarterback. They have a good running game. The O-line got better. They added Jonah Jackson this year. They upgraded their secondary. The pass rush, I think, is going to be good. They have that verse, and they have
Yeah, they
Fisk.
lost Aaron Donald.
They lost Aaron
And
Donald.
they're assuming Braden Fisk is going to come in and replace Aaron Donald. Yeah, good luck with that. I think they're a little bit overrated because of and Sean deserves his reputation, and so does Les. But I think if anything, they're going to take a step back. And anybody who's been here since day one, I'm a big Stafford guy. I used to argue with Jody about Stafford.
I know you will.
Tremendous quarterback, but he's also 35, 36, whatever he is. Getting closer. He's not what he was in Detroit. But yeah, I think they're a little bit overrated.
Who do you have? So you have Lions, Niners, Eagles, Dallas, Green Bay, and then 6 and 7.
Yeah,
if
then
you
I got a
already did.
bunch of you mix and match. If you
Unfortunately,
want
that's
me
what
to
do it.
boil it down, if you want me to choose somebody, I would say Vikings 6, Saints 7.
Okay, so yours is different than mine for sure. I
And
don't like the
probably,
Vikings.
I the Bucks.
Yeah, the Bucks
Boy,
are there, but they're not top 7 to me. What about ATL? You don't have ATL in there.
No,
I think they got some talent.
They're in there as well. It's a whole jumbled bunch of teams. But yeah,
There's a lot of mediocrity right now in the NFC.
I don't like what it tells you. I mean, everybody's got good players. I say that all the time. Part of my issue with Atlanta is I think they build the team incorrectly.
Yeah.
Not that they don't have a bunch of good players, because they do, but everybody has good players in the NFL, including the teams we haven't mentioned. They all have good players. But that's where I'd go. So I'd Minnesota 6, New Orleans 7. The difference between them and Atlanta and Tampa Bay and Seattle, minimal.
Yeah, it's pick 'em basically for those last couple spots. So let me just recap real quick. We have about 6 minutes to go, or 7 minutes to go until Martin Frank gets in. So we'll talk to Martin Frank. But JMac has Lions as the number one team in the NFC. Good stuff. Loaded team. Johnny Mac actually laid that out pretty nicely. Almost convinced me to change my list on the fly. 2 is 49ers. 3 is Eagles. 4 Dallas, 5 Green Bay, 6 Vikings, 7 Saints. So Johnny Mac, that's his top 7 rosters as we are here in June. So this obviously can change, but it's our June ranking of the NFC. I have 49ers 1, 2 Eagles, 3 Detroit, 4 Green Bay, 5 LA, 6 Dallas, 7 ATL. So a little bit of a lot of different lists, but there, like I said, there's last couple are definitely pick'ems. I am not as high on the Cowboys as you are, Johnny Mac. Where's my girl SMD Eagles? She brought it up, and I'm with her on it. Let me see if I can find it. Dallas has no DTs, bad at linebacker, bad at safety, and we'll have rookie starting at center and LT.
Well, they're bad at running back, but I don't give a shit. Just like I don't give a shit that the Eagles are good at running back. I don't give a shit that they're bad at running back. I mean, Mozzie Smith obviously has to take a big step forward. He did not have a good rookie season, but again, there's certainly some talent there. And then the other Osa, and I don't want to butcher his name, but the kid from UCLA, he's a good player. I don't know. People haven't noticed that. He's a very good player. So yeah, I mean, and defensive backs, we talk about the Eagles youth. I mean, they're proven. Again, there's some Eagles centric, and I get it. That's what we are. I get, and they hate the Cowboys. And Micah Parsons. Yeah, the whole thought of they didn't extend.
Takes plays off. He's a highly overrated. Everybody said he's going to be the next coming of LT. The guy has been nothing close to that. I'm really not that sold on him. He's also
if he were here
in the offseason.
Yeah, now this is an example of Zander, your Eagles colored glasses coming out. If he were here, you would say he's better than
he
Lawrence
doesn't show
Taylor.
up in any big games either.
And Gary Myers would freaking kill you. First of all, don't compare anybody to Lawrence Taylor. So is he Lawrence Taylor?
I'm not. I'm just telling you what Cowboys fans told me every day when they drafted the guy. And he doesn't. He's talk about diva. The guy's the biggest diva of them all, and he hasn't even earned the right to be.
Well, I mean, people would say the same thing about AJ. I mean, he talks a lot. He should probably.
I think AJ's earned the right, and he's not even a diva.
Well, I agree with that. I've tried to tell people for that a million years. I'm saying he talks a lot. So does Micah. You don't get to be Micah Parsons and not work your ass off. It's same as what I would say about AJ. We were talking a little bit about his off-season work ethic. He doesn't just show up. Now, Micah Parsons has been in the league for 3 years. Not that it's a be-all, end-all. Edge rushers, 1 of 86, 2 of 119, 2 of 112. Those are his 3 seasons. He is unfreaking believable. He is unblockable. If you ask Nick Sirianni about Micah Parsons, strap in, because he ain't going to think what you're thinking. In fact, the first thing he says about Micah Parsons, when we're talking about RPOs, if you can't block him, read him. And that's what the Eagles do with Micah Parsons.
That's what I mean. He's a one-dimensional player.
Because, come on. There are certain players. I used to hear this about Aaron Donald, where people would say, I don't know, to be contrarians. Well, sometimes he doesn't keep his gap in the run game because he's beating his freaking block so quickly. Is he a human being? Is he perfect? No. If he were here in Philadelphia, you would think he's the greatest player in the history of the NFL. He is unbelievable. He is by far, if you want to talk about the Cowboys and the Eagles and you want honesty, by far the best defensive player on either team is Micah Parsons. By far. Nobody has a better ability to block people over the past 5 years in the NFL than the Philadelphia Eagles. And they can't block them. And they admit they can't block them. And that's why they read them.
Lane
So
Johnson blocked him,
don't
didn't
give
he?
me the Eagles fan Micah Parsons can't play or Micah talks this.
I
or
didn't
Micah
say he can't
talks
play.
that.
I said I think he's overrated. I don't think he does what everybody thinks he does. He's not a game wrecker, especially late in seasons.
Oh
where
my God.
I don't
He's not
see
a
it.
game wrecker. He wrecks every game before he even steps on the field because everybody spends their freaking week trying to figure out how to deal with him.
I'm not sold on. I agree. I think he's a good player. I don't think he's this astronomical talent.
I can't.
The
I
Cowboys
can't.
didn't even extend the guy. That
I
means he
can't-
doesn't even have a contract.
And that's what it's about because they haven't extended him. They
That's not
haven't
what it's about,
extended
but
him
that's a
because
part of it.
he's going to get the largest non-quarterback contract in NFL history.
That's what he wants. That's not what he's going to get, John. You think?
You wanna
Wait, so you're
bet?
telling me Nick Bosa or Micah Parsons? You're going to take Micah Parsons?
Easily.
Oh
Easily.
my! Not even. I wouldn't.
He's
even
gonna
think about
he's gonna make more money than Justin Jefferson.
No.
He's gonna make more money than Nick Bosa. And if the Eagles could pay it to him, they would.
I do
Now
not
the
see that
Cowboys,
at all.
it's very fair to point out that Jerry Jones is an idiot and he taxes himself, and he's going to have to pay CD Lamb more than he would have. He's going to have to pay Dak Prescott more than he would have. He's going to have to pay Micah Parsons more than he would have if he was proactive. That's a different conversation. That's one of those.
So
That's
is he the
one of
best edge in the league for you? You think he's better than Myles Garrett? You think he's better than Nick Bosa? all those guys?
I think Myles Garrett is the best edge rusher, but he's number 2 for me. And he's gonna, but it's his turn.
His turn to get paid. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, he's phenomenal. He's phenomenal. And by the way, the Cowboys fell ass backwards into it. They thought he was an all-ball linebacker. So, and then you add Mike Zimmer to the mix, and if he brings that A-gap shit back, and I don't know what Mike's going to do because he's 70 years old and he's grew up, but if he brings that shit back, the Eagles are going to have some issues. I'll tell you that. But we'll see how that shakes out.
Highest paid non-quarterback in the league. You better be playing late in the year, unlike he has been in recent months. He has been-
Apologies when he gets that contract. I expect them. I
I will
expect
give
them
them to
every
you.
put of the line.
If he is the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL, I will apologize to you right here on Birds.
That's your first Jody moment where you're so off base, I can't even discuss it.
I'll take it. All right, let's get to our first commercial break. Martin Frank coming up next. So stay tuned, everybody, on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wild wood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Valle Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Birds 365. Joined now by the controversial Martin Frank, who stirred up Philadelphia this week.
Stirring it up, the shit stir, Martin Frank. Good to see you,
that
Martin.
word?
Yeah, we can say that word.
All right.
I think we can say that word. I say that
We
word.
can say that word.
Yeah. What were your thoughts? You were the one who asked Jalen Hurts what was, by your own admittance, kind of a layup, kind of a easy question to answer, and he didn't have an easy time answering it. So, what were your thoughts in the moment?
Well, in the moment, I was thinking to myself, "Wait a minute, why isn't he answering the question?" I didn't wasn't exactly what I was expecting. I kind of was expecting him to say something. Oh, Nick's doing a great job. It says a lot about the guy to, sacrifice, giving up the offense and everything like that. But he didn't really say that at all. He's like, it was a great question. I don't really have an answer for you. I was kind of surprised. So I'm like, well, what have you seen from him so far? And that's when he kind of gave another non-answer saying his messaging has been great or something like that.
With a bunch of long pauses in between coming up with the messages he's delivering to the team and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I don't think you are, Martin. We haven't had that discussion. So I don't want to delve into Jalen's head, but I do think it brings up a point that I've kind of took it where I was writing about it, and that was with Nick's comments, which I think were bigger because he admitted that he's basically not with Jalen very much anymore. And he's kind of untethered himself from the starting quarterback. And that to me is never a good sign as a head coach when you're not in lockstep, especially as an offensive guy, when you're not in lockstep with the quarterback.
Yeah. Nick kind of mentioned now he has a 30,000 foot view of the whole operation. He doesn't have, he even said this, he doesn't have to spend every minute with Jalen Hurts. He can devote more time to, pointing something out to someone on defense or special teams. I mean, we saw him in practice one day get on the special teams unit for, not executing a return properly, that type of thing. But it kind of struck me because the one answer he did give was, I believe, to your question about adjusting to the new offense. And he said, it's 95% new.
Yeah.
That is a huge, in my opinion, a huge admission, and pretty much scraps everything that Sirianni has done, for the last 3 years, except for maybe the tush push. Maybe that's the 5% that's carrying over. But I thought that was a huge admission. And then you kind of take it into context with how he answered my question. and I mean, not that I am a psychologist, I'm not, but maybe you could take it to mean that he is so focused on learning this offense and, delving into it in every possible way that he doesn't really have time to worry about how Nick Sirianni might be taking, the demotion, so to speak. That's definitely one way to look at it. I mean, it's just like the 95% new offense admission from him, I thought was huge. I mean, Jalen Hurts doesn't say that much. And when he said that,
No. And I think it was very intentional when he said it, because let's be honest, Martin, they struggled during the spring offensively, the first team specifically.
Yeah.
And generally 7-on-7s are geared towards offensive success. And they didn't have a lot of success. So I think he wanted that out there, that it's like, look, there's going to be some hiccups. We're learning a completely new offense. But you threw in an interesting word there to me. Nick's been demoted. Is that how you say it? Nick's been demoted?
In a way, yes. I mean, he's still the head coach, but the past 3 years, I mean, this was his offense. This was his baby. He was involved in every single nuance, involved with game planning, involved with, the plays that were called. I mean, even though he wasn't actually doing the play calling, it was based on, plays that they had discussed, whether it was with Shane Steichen as the offensive coordinator or last year with Brian Johnson. I mean, that was Nick's offense, and now it's Kellen Moore's offense. Kellen Moore is the one who's going to be making the decisions on, what play gets run, when it gets run, and all that. Nick doesn't really have a whole, it seems to us anyway, he doesn't really have a whole lot to do with that anymore. And, and obviously the defense, that's Vic Fangio's. I mean, that's always been, ever since Nick's been the coach here, that's been a purview of the defensive coordinator. So he doesn't really have a huge hand in that. I mean, he's more of a CEO coach, and in a sense, it's a demotion from what he was the last 3 years. But in another sense, you look around the league, I mean, guys like John Harbaugh have been very successful in that role. I mean, and in a lot of ways, it speaks to a lot of Nick's strengths. I mean, he is good with connecting with people and everything, and now he has more opportunities to do that. So, yes, in a way, it's a demotion because he's not the one running the offense. It's not his show anymore. But also, in another sense, that he can oversee more things. And I think maybe that's what he does best. I mean, we're going to find out, because if it doesn't work this year, then there probably won't be a next year for him.
Martin, what do you make of the citywide response to your question? I mean, is it a case of it's June and we need something and we made more of it, and this is typical Jalen Hurts, who doesn't give much in responses, or is there real cause for concern here?
I would go with the first part of that. Like it's June.
It's June. It is June.
The Sixers and Flyers have been long done. The Phillies are steamrolling everybody basically. And the Eagles are now on a break for 6 weeks, so this is going to linger, obviously. But you go back to, it was kind of like the same thing at the end of last season when there was all this talk, going through the collapse that Nick was going to get fired. Or there was a lot of speculation about it. And then I remember after the loss to Tampa Bay, we were in the press conference afterwards asking Jalen Hurts, like, do you want your coach back? And he's like, I didn't know he was going anywhere. I mean, it was another type of non-answer.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't come right out and say, hey, I want Nick back. He's our coach. It was more like dancing around it and stuff. And, obviously Nick did come back and everything. And, a couple of days later, Hurts tried to explain himself and saying, well, that's not my decision and all that. But, yeah, I mean, I don't take a whole lot. I don't put a whole lot of stock into it. I mean, he's the franchise quarterback. They gave him a $255 million contract, essentially. If he really wanted Nick Sirianni fired, Nick Sirianni would have been fired. The way I look at it.
Yeah. But I do think there's something to, and you mentioned it goes farther back than just what he said recently. You mentioned after the season, if you go back to the Seattle game where Nick made that weird sort of defense of Jalen and AJ Brown, and we're all like, "What are you talking about, dude?" And it turns out that he was protecting AJ. It was AJ who admitted that. The quarterback still hasn't admitted it or thanked him for it, for jumping on his sword. So I do think there might be a little bit of something there, but to me, the bigger aspect is what you're talking about, the offense, and 95% new, as you mentioned, Martin. So do you believe, and this goes up to Jeffrey Lurie, because I don't think Jeffrey mandated to Nick Sirianni that you have to change your offense or you're going to be fired. I don't think that mandate came. But I think Nick is politically savvy enough that he knew he couldn't walk into the office and say, "Hey, I'm Doug Peterson this. I'm going status quo. I want what I want. I want 29. We'll figure it out. We'll double down." And I want to ask you about Jeffrey, because Jeffrey, he likes to say he asks questions. Like, I can ask you, Martin, I'm going to ask you a question. You can ask me a question. And we're peers. You might be better than me, but we're peers, and it's not that big of a deal. We can ask back and forth. If your boss asks you a question, and the example I'll give you is after Doug Peterson upset Green Bay in Green Bay, and Jeffrey said, "Hey, why didn't we pass the ball more?" And Doug took it as, "What the fuck? What do you mean? I just upset Aaron Rodgers at Lambeau Field." My point is that carries weight. It might be, from Jeffrey's standpoint, it might be completely innocent, but it carries weight because of who he is.
Yeah.
So that's a long way, and I'm sorry I'm getting wordy, but that's a long way to say you don't really believe Nick wanted to give up his offense. I don't believe that. Do you believe that?
Martin froze up
I
on me.
don't believe it
got
as much. I mean, one thing we know about Jeffrey, he wants to be on the cutting edge of offensive football, and he's pretty much told us that in the past. He wants offensive innovation, and perhaps he sees a guy like Kellen Moore, who's got a history of being a pass first type of coordinator, a young guy, I believe he's 35, 36 years old, with a bright future of being able to come in and kind of like help the Eagles revolutionize offensive football. And, by Nick's own admission last year, it had gone stale. So maybe some of it was self-preservation on Nick's part, knowing that, in order to save his job, he had to, do this. Nick has said on the record in the past that it was totally his decision to change offensive coordinators and hire Kellen Moore. And, Jeffrey Lurie obviously has to sign off on it. So I'm sure he had a hand in that as well. I just think that where the Eagles offense was going at the end of the year wasn't in the right direction. And, you go back to the Doug Peterson example, and I think one of the things he wanted to do was actually make Press Taylor his offensive coordinator, and Jeffrey Lurie said, no, sorry.
Poor Press, by the way. Poor
Press, exactly. So, yeah, Sirianni showed a willingness to change, and I think that resonates with Jeffrey Lurie because he's the one who's interested in innovation. He's the one who's interested in, opening all these doors offensively. I don't think he cares a whole lot about defense. So, if you're going to win, you're going to have to win with offense. And that's why I think a lot of the changes were made. We all saw how last year finished. I don't think Sirianni was in a position, and I don't think Lurie was going to let him, even if he wanted to, stick with the status quo. I think it had to change, and it had to change drastically, and that's what we're seeing.
Is he interested in change, or was he interested in the politics of keeping his job? But
well, yeah, that's
I digress. Martin Frank, a lot was made of the 95% comment you brought up. How long do you think it could take for this team to get going and in rhythm with these new coordinators this year?
It could take a while. Not as much defensively. I think kind of what they're doing with Vic Fangio is kind of what they've been trying to do, the past few years because they've had his disciples. So I think it's just a question of having a competent enough defense. I think that'll, I don't think that'll take as much time, but I could definitely see the offense maybe, having some hiccups here and there into the early part of the season. I mean, you look at their early schedule, I believe they open obviously with Green Bay, playoff team. They come back and they face Atlanta, and then they're at New Orleans and Tampa Bay. I mean, there could be some bumps and bruises along the way. Maybe they're 2-2 after those 4 games, and Hurts might be struggling here and there, and the offense might be, trying to find it. But I think as the season goes on, it'll definitely, I think it'll get to a point where they're, back to where they were, like, a top 10 offense and everything like that. It just might take a little bit more time, and training camp might not be enough time for it to happen.
Yeah. Spring work, you and I have seen a lot of it over the years, Martin. It is what it is. It's not that important. That said, you can only report on what you see. Is there a position you came out of mini camp and said, they're just not deep enough here, they're not good enough here, where you think Howie might start saying, we might have to add something, during camp, even before the cut to 53?
That's an interesting question. I mean, obviously the big talking point, I guess, would be what's going to happen with the third wide receiver. And, obviously other than Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, there really isn't anyone who stood out a whole lot. I mean, Paris Campbell and John Ross, both the veterans, those guys can fly, and they looked pretty good from here and there. And, Johnny Wilson, actually the draft 6th round pick, made a couple really nice catches, and I think he has some potential, but will Howie go out and get somebody, a bona fide third wide receiver? It's possible, but then you look at it another way is, Saquon Barkley could be that third wide receiver technically, in passing situations. I kind of like Wilson. I like, Paris Campbell and John Ross both have incredible speed. So, I would think possibly that position could use some help, but I think they could get by if they had to. I was kind of impressed. I thought at linebacker, they're a lot deeper and better than they were last year. Safety.
Where are you on the Kobe? That's one where I think a lot of people have turned the page on the Kobe, because Devin White performed pretty well. It's pretty clear that Vic likes Zach Bond.
Yeah,
I'm not so sure. I think when he's completely healthy,
right,
when training camp starts, I think you're going to see a lot of Nakobe Dean with the first team defense. And if he fails, he fails. But I think the Eagles are still going to give him a chance. Where are you on Nakobe?
Yeah, I think the difference is this year as opposed to last year is last year they went into it like, Nakobe, the job is yours. You're going to be our guy, and go out there and do your job. And obviously he got hurt. He didn't play well when he was healthy, and then he only ended up playing 5 games. And I think this year they're going into it like, okay, Nakobe, the job can still be yours, but we're going to push you, and you're going to have to earn it. And if you do, great. We have a nice young linebacker for the next, 3 or 4 years. But if you don't, well, we got Zach Bond, and he showed he can do it. We went out and signed Devin White, who was a number 5 overall pick of the Bucs in 2019, and we drafted Jeremiah Trotter. So I think they have more of a fallback in case Nakobe Dean doesn't live up to what they thought, and this is a critical year for him in that regard. I don't take a whole lot into him being with the second unit in the spring, just because he was just cleared to resume football activities after his foot surgery. I think if that's still the case in training camp, then that's a bigger issue, obviously.
Yeah.
Because now he's got, 6 or 7 weeks to kind of finish up his rehab, ramp up, get ready for the season. So yeah, I think they're going to make him earn his job. I'm not saying he can't. And I think if he is going to be the guy at linebacker, it's because he earned the job, and that would be obviously a credit to him.
How do you think it would play out if Nakobe Dean did earn the job with Devin White and Zach Bond? I guess because then it would be those two fighting for the next spot.
I'm sorry, did you say did or did not?
I'm saying if Nakobe Dean did take the job, at the Mike linebacker, how do you think it plays out with Devin White and Zach Bond?
Well, I think Devin White would probably be the starter on the other side, but I think having a guy like Zach Bond is definitely helps them because he's a guy who can play so many different roles and positions. You can put him down an edge rusher if you need to. He can work in. Injuries happen during the course of a season, as we've seen, the last few years, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So, there's going to be a place for whoever doesn't get that starting job. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a situation where he'll never play. I just think that ideally, like, it would be Nakobe Dean and Devin White, and then, Zach Bond can work in every now and then. But I still think it would be Devin White's job to lose. I think he would have the edge there. And I think it would say a lot if Devin White isn't the starter because, here's a guy, like I said, who was the number 5 overall pick, and, he can't start at linebacker on the Eagles. I mean, that would say a lot about
Yeah, that would not be good.
But I thought he played pretty well in the spring practices.
He did. But I don't think anybody with Devin, I don't think anybody questions his athleticism, as you mentioned. I mean, number 5 overall pick. He runs. You saw him on the wheel route to Saquon Barkley. He's running step for step with him. But, as Bobby King says, it's pajama day or whatever. The whole thing with Devin White, when the pads come on, he's, maybe he takes some false steps. Maybe he's not in the best position at the time. Maybe he's freelancing a little bit. That was the knock in Tampa. He's a guy I think you got to wait and see when the pads come on and when the Eagles' offensive line is out there, because then the play action comes into it with Saquon Barkley or the RPOs with Saquon. Then you got to worry about the running game. Whereas, all those young defensive backs and Devin White, all they had to worry about in the spring, Martin, was defending the pass. And they're all jumping routes and they're all athletes and they all look great.
Mm-hmm.
But the minute that offensive line comes out there and the running game's involved, it becomes a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I want to press the pause button on Devin White, but the defense as a whole, and those young defensive backs, boy, you looked at everybody does winners and losers during the spring. You can go down the list of cornerbacks, except for poor Eli Ricks.
Yeah.
Mitchell looked great. DeJean looked great. Ringo looked tremendous. I think Isaiah Rodgers was the best player in the spring period.
Yeah.
It's a lot better than it was. Even Tyler Hall, I throw him in there. He's getting first team reps.
Yeah.
It's a lot different than last year. That overcorrection might work for the Eagles.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that, could possibly be a hiccup is you have Darius Slay on one side who, still is at a Pro Bowl level. And, we think will probably still be this year. But, people might not throw at him because on the other side, you've got 3 or 4 guys who are relatively unproven. Isaiah Rodgers, obviously he started before in Indianapolis, but he's never been really like, the guy. Ringo is young. Quinyon Mitchell is a rookie. If Cooper DeJean is out there, I mean, those guys are going to get tested and pretty quickly. I mean, you'll see Jordan
Love week 1. Yeah. All those great Green Bay young receivers.
Yeah. And we know what Kirk Cousins can do now that he's with Atlanta in week 2. So that's going to be the ultimate test. I mean, obviously they were exploited last year because James Bradbury had such a bad season. So we're going to have to see. I mean, yeah, they look great. Like you mentioned, they're jumping routes because they know basically what's coming and stuff. And Isaiah Rogers looked great. And Ringo was step for step with A.J. Brown and, covering everybody. And Quinyon Mitchell obviously didn't look overmatched. So, that's 7-on-7 practicing in pajamas. When it's 11-on-11 and Jordan Love is looking deep for his guys, or, Kirk Cousins going to Kyle Pitts, and, you got week 4 Baker Mayfield with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I mean,
Yeah.
that's when we'll find out how good these guys really are. But they did look good in the spring.
Yeah, that's a good point, Martin. One more. I want to ask you, last one from me. I want to ask you about the Hassan Reddick deal. Doesn't show up to camp this week. Can Howie start to, take his flowers for that? Everybody was hard on Howie. I thought they were rightfully so, because when I watched your guys' initial press conference with him after that, I wasn't a fan of how he got really defensive. I get it, but I wasn't a fan of it. Do you think he can take his flowers on that deal now?
Yes and no. I mean,
we got to see still, right? Yeah.
Like, it was only the spring. A lot of those veteran guys, it doesn't really mean a whole lot to them. If it lingers in the training camp and Hassan Reddick still a holdout, a lot of times what happens is those guys will hold out. They'll come to camp late, a couple weeks late. They'll be out of shape. They won't have a good year and everything like that. And that's when, yes, it will definitely backfire on the Jets, and you can give Howie all the flowers you want. But for now, it's still mid-June. They could get something done in the 6 weeks before training camp, and Hassan can come in, rejuvenated with a brand new contract and have a great year. And Bryce Huff might not work out, and you say, oh man, what was he doing letting Hassan Reddick go? So it's still kind of too early to get a sense on it. But I think what you're seeing with Hassan Reddick and the Jets is what you would have seen had he still been with the Eagles. I mean, there was no way he was going to play this season, in Philly on the last year of his contract without some kind of extension. And from what we can best understand, I mean, he obviously wants something in the, upper echelon, Nick Bosa type of contract.
Ooh, he ain't getting there. He ain't getting there.
But I mean, obviously the Eagles weren't going to do it. So, Howie's like, all right, I'm going to cut my losses now, maybe get something in return for Hassan Reddick, which I guess he did, like a conditional 3rd-round pick.
Yeah, he got his day 2 pick. He had to go a couple years down the road, but you got to give
kind of like if he leaves after this year as a free agent, and he has a really good year, then he would be worth a 3rd-round comp pick, and Howie has the potential of turning that into a 2nd-round pick if he actually plays well. So he got something basically, and he signed a younger guy who's unproven in Bryce Huff, but has the potential to be like Hassan Reddick.
Yeah.
So.
At M Frank NFL, make sure you follow Martin on X. Read him at DelawareOnline.com. Does a tremendous job there covering your Philadelphia Eagles. You and I, there's been a lot of Andrew Van Ginkel talk in the offseason in Philadelphia, which is weird because he doesn't play here. But he was so good under Vic Fangio in Miami. I think a lot of us thought, well, they might go after him in free agency. Turns out they didn't go in that direction. But he's a very unique player, and he's a great edge rusher, but he can play in coverage. And that's what we saw that a lot in the spring. He plays these overhang players. He drops them in the coverage a little bit more than fans are going to like. They don't have an Andrew Van Ginkel who's going to seamlessly do that. If it's Zach Bond or Nolan Smith, who's your prediction of that particular type of player?
I'd say right now, Zach Bond. I mean, I think Nolan Smith is still kind of raw. I don't think I'm not sure if he really can master that part of the defense just yet. I think maybe over time he can, but I think right now, if you were to ask me week 1, I think if he had a choice, it would be Zach Bond.
Yeah. I'm hoping it's Nolan by week 10.
Possibly.
I think that's a bad sign if it's not, but that's just me. But maybe maybe Zach Bond can turn in. Andrew Van Ginkle wasn't Andrew Van Ginkle until Vic Fangio. So who knows?
Mm-hmm.
And nobody's Martin Frank. I appreciate it. At M Frank NFL. Thanks, Martin.
All
Martin,
right.
thanks for being here, buddy. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thanks, man.
Martin Frank joining us on Birds 365. Just a couple minutes left to go. Johnny Mac and I had a pretty good NFC debate talking about Michael Parsons, the green colored glasses.
Oh, man. Come on. I should have asked Martin about that because Martin knows how Nick Sirianni talks about Michael Parsons. Yeah. They have tremendous respect for Micah Parsons. I'll just put it that way.
Well, you think, I mean, you said you think he's going to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. You think he's going to get that in Dallas?
Yes.
Boy,
Jerry pays at the end. He just
why does he
pays
do
more
that?
than he has to.
I just don't understand why the guy does that. I mean, you cost yourself
now
$1 million.
that is a legitimate criticism. I have no idea why Jerry does it. Maybe because he can do it. He's worth more money than God, but I don't know. That I agree with. That is a bad way to do business, and I think he should be criticized for it. But ultimately, when people talk about the bad offseason, I think they bring that up too much. They still have those players that they should have extended them earlier for the business standpoint of getting a little bit better of a deal like the Eagles do by being proactive, but they're still playing for the Dallas Cowboys. And Dak Prescott's going to be a top 10 quarterback, and Micah Parsons is going to be one of the best edge rushers in football, and CeeDee Lamb's going to be one of the best playmaking receivers in football. They're all still there. So,
yeah, well, I went back and looked. Michael Parsons. Here's my problem with him. Because I'm not saying he's not a good player. I don't want to say he's not a good player. I don't think he's in the league of Myles Garrett, or I really don't even think he's in the league of Nick Bosa. Last 7 games, including the playoff game, he has 2.5 sacks.
Don't go sacks with me with Jody, please.
I'm just saying that's what he is, though. He's a sack.
Well, look at his pressure percentage. And that is the key. That is the indication of somebody, because so many different things, and Chris Long describes this better than anybody. So many things have to happen for you to get a sack. And you have to look at every single one of those sacks and see, sometimes it may be as an edge rusher like Chris was. Sometimes maybe Fletcher Cox was collapsing the pocket and being selfless, and all of a sudden the quarterback has to run into you and you get a sack, and it's all Fletcher. And that's why, and Dan Campbell was just talking about this in Detroit, and he's an offensive guy, because someone asked him about, hey, Goopy media question, how many sacks is Aiden Hutchinson getting this year? What's his ceiling? And Dan was like, well, I don't know, but he's a really good pass rusher. And then he went into pressure percentage, and that's the more important role, because he's always putting pressure, and he's a very consistent player. So I don't care about sack numbers. I think it's one of the most, and people know that it's never a bad thing if you get a sack, but so many things factor into it. If you get consistent pressure, maybe the other guys aren't doing their job. That is a bigger thing for coaches and what they want from them, their particular players. And that's why the Eagles, by the way, are so high on Bryce Huff, because his pressure percentages were so good. Now, granted, in a more limited role,
right?
And there's got to be, we got to see if he can hold up to that longer role. But his pressure percentages are off the charts, because he's always creating some kind of stress for the offense. Mike is right there with, I'm not going to say anybody's better than Myles Garrett. Martin and I got to see Myles Garrett in person. That is a frightening thing.
That dude is a beast.
Jordan Mailata is one of the best left tackles in football. Couldn't block him. Just could not block him in practice. Unbelievable player.
Kind of made Jordan Mailata look like a rag doll a little bit, didn't he?
Yeah, he's unbelievable. Nick's great. Nick's great. I put him a little bit behind those two. If you were asking me, I'd say Miles is 1, Mike is 2, and Nick's 3. But they're all great in their own way. But Nick's getting Defensive Player of the Year awards. You get those awards because you had a big sack season. Doesn't mean when you don't get the award, you're not the same player. And the same thing with Devin White. People say Devin White was an all-pro. He was an all-pro because he got 9 sacks. And people look at a piece of paper and say, oh, a linebacker got 9 sacks. He didn't deserve to be an all-pro. He didn't, but he was. So you have to look at these things individually. Mike is a guy who creates stress on the offense. And the first thing you're thinking about when you play the Dallas Cowboys is how are we going to block Micah Parsons? And when you game plan for people, that's when you know they're a big deal.
Yeah, I think he's a big deal. I just, maybe you're right. Maybe it's homework glasses. I don't know. I just don't love him like that. Like I don't view him in the light that when we talk about Myles Garrett, he's that. I did look up his pressure rate. You're right. I mean, he led the NFL in quarterback pressures with 102. Quarterback pressure rate was 22.4 and pass rush win rate was 37.6. So, I mean, the guy you are right about that. He's a beast. And James Carver, who I trust in the chat, who is a football guy through and through and a stat guy and all that stuff. He backs it up as well. I just don't see him in that light. Maybe that is because I'm an Eagle fan, but I don't mind the guy. I think he's a great player, but that with all the other BS he has going on and the podcast and everything like that,
the podcast stuff, if I were the Cowboys, I'd like him to stop that as well. But that to me is different.
Yeah, that's different. That's not about football ability. Yeah. But I think when you're signing a player to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL,
well, that's just about that. That's just about timing, and it's his turn, and that's the way it's going to be. I mean, that's not, like I said, I would take Miles. Miles is a little bit older. Obviously, he's 28. He got a longer shelf life. Miles has only been in the league for 3 years, three-time All-Pro. I mean, there's not much more he can do. PFF number 1, number 2, number 2. I mean, what are we arguing here? This guy, I mean, there's certain players, and I always bring it up I got to cover Randy Moss, and his peers would speak in such awe of him as a player. There's so many good players in the NFL, and they're like, most of them are like, and then there's certain guys, they're just NFL players are in awe of them. Aaron Donald was that way. Randy Moss was that way. Micah Parsons is that way as well. His peers are in awe of him. His peers are.
I don't talk to the peers. You talk to the peers a lot more than I do. So I'll take your word for it. But that surprises me. I mean, I'll end with this. And you can call me batshit crazy on the way out the door today, and I'm okay with that. When I think of Micah Parsons, I think he's a great player. I want to make that clear. But I view him potential-wise, talent-wise, as I guess it's not the right example because he's a couple years behind. But when you talk about how good Jalen Carter can be talent-wise at DT, that's how I view Micah Parsons at the edge. That type of talent, that type of ability, not going to be the greatest in the world, but that type
of ability. I think Jalen has the talent to be that. But again, we're already after year 1, Micah Parsons was better than Jalen Carter. He was an all-pro. Yeah. Micah Parsons. And by the way, again, part of it is a lot. I mean, this is one, and maybe I have some bias in the fact that, and you can go back to when we were talking about that draft, and I would say people would talk about Mike as an off-ball linebacker because of his arm length. And I said, he's not an off-ball linebacker. He's an edge rusher. And people who are going to play him an off-ball linebacker are going to be disappointed. Well, They drafted him to be an all-Paul linebacker. And then they had
found out
2 injuries, and they said, well, let's try him outside. And bang, he took off. And he became what he is. So they got kind of lucky, if you want to take it from that standpoint. Dallas, it wasn't the plan. But I mean, yeah, I always say, at some point, I can't. If you don't like the Dallas Cowboys, that's fine as a Philadelphia Eagle fan. But if you can't recognize greatness,
no, I can recognize
help
greatness. I just don't want to say he's on the level of the top 2 in the league. But I mean, you've made a good point. I'm not going to lie. I think you have made a good point. And maybe
when I was young, I hated Larry Bird. I hated Larry Bird.
Yeah, but you knew how good he was, right?
Well, when I was younger, I didn't. You know, when I got older and I realized, oh yeah, he's freaking tremendous, beyond, description, and just one of the greatest players of all time. And I hated the Celtics. That was the problem.
You were a Sixers fan, that's right, gentlemen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was my favorite team as a youngster, and I just hated the Boston Celtics, and it clouded my view. I've gotten past that, and Larry Bird is one of the greatest players of all time. I get the hatred of the Cowboys, but I'm not going to lie to you and say because you like the Eagles that Micah Parsons, if he were here, you'd be over the moon for him.
You think he's a generational talent, though?
Oh, God, yeah. God, yeah. He's been in the league 3 years, 3-time All-Pro, number 1, number 2. You look at the film. He is a dominant player. When every single team on Dallas's schedule plays the Dallas Cowboys, the offensive coaching staff sits down and says, how are we going to block 11? That's where it starts. Their whole week. Everything else is secondary. Everything else.
Who gets paid more, Michael Parsons or CeeDee Lamb?
Micah.
How much higher are we going to go on Mike? What's he going to make, $40 million a year?
Mike is going past Justin Jefferson. CeeDee Lamb ain't going past Justin Jefferson.
Well, he's going to ask to go past Justin Jefferson. He doesn't deserve it.
He can ask. He ain't getting past.
He's not getting past him, but I think he's going to get maybe past AJ.
Yeah, he's getting past AJ. The Eagles got a bargain on AJ. That's why the Eagles are smart. CeeDee's going way past AJ. He's going to be in
legends are built in the playoffs. I'm with you, Twiz. I need to see it in the big games, Micah.
Yeah. Well, there's 52 other players on the playoff teams.
No, I know that, but when you're paid as the highest paid non-quarterback, you better make an impact on that game. I don't care what position you play. So, all right, Johnny.
Well, Myles Garrett has never won a Super Bowl. Nick Bosa hasn't won a Super. People they move the goalpost. He's a great fucking player. I don't care. He's got a star on his helmet. He is a great player. And if you can't see that, I'm not criticizing you, Zander. But if Eagles fans can't see it, personally, you're just being biased. You're just being biased. Period. End of sentence.
This guy says, I'm not going to lie, I was with you, Zander, until you started the Micah hate. It's not hate. I just said I didn't think he was a generational talent, but that's fair, Terrence. I'm fine with you thinking that. Johnny Mac, good show today, brother. We'll come back tomorrow. We got 2 guests planned for tomorrow with Damo and Ed Kratz. So good show planned tomorrow. Thanks for running a little over with me here. Thanks, everybody in the chat, for tuning in. We appreciate each and every one of you. How many likes did we get up to today? We're at 96.
Probably not as many because I'm giving a Cowboys.
The people aren't hating on you. Johnny Mac, when one thing I love about you is you always make great points, whether people agree with you or not. You make great points, so I appreciate that very much. We're at 97 likes, guys. Let's get a couple more likes before we get out the door here. We appreciate you guys. 99. Come on, one more. We appreciate it. And nothing. Nothing. I'm limping into the finish line here with 99. That'll do it for Birds 365 today. Thank you all very much in the chat. You guys have been fantastic. We appreciate all your questions. By the way, for anybody that missed it in hour 1, we had a little bit of a Q&A today, which was really good. And I think we'll have a couple more opportunities to do that, especially in the off season when there's lesser things going on and stuff and people are on vacation. So if you guys have good chats, good questions for Johnny Mac, bring it this off season and we will try and get to all of them the best we can. Thanks everybody for being here. Johnny Mack, thank you, sir. We'll catch you tomorrow on Birds 365.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.